Right, so today I want to talk you through the Lockjaw Thanos versus Sandman matchup. These games were all played in the 70s on day one, so it should be infinite rank gameplay if that's something that's important to you. But I found the matchup 13 times in my climbing session and went 7 and 6, though we're going to call it 6 and 6 because one of the wins was Kang crashing the game and me winning because I had Sunspot. But so we'll say a 50% win rate with some jarring misplays on my end and a few of the losses. But the point I want to illustrate is that this is by no means a doomed matchup. So I'm going to show you all of the games, all 12 of them, because they're pretty short, and kind of talk you through what the win conditions are, what the loss conditions are, if I lost, why I lost, if I could have won that game, if I won a game, if I could have lost it, and really get down into the pressure points in this matchup, which really seems to just come down to Sandman versus Leech. If we accelerate into Sandman and Leech on the same time, it kind of depends on how the Leech came out. Like, if I waved and that's why we Sandman and Leeched at the same time, that's very favorable for me. But if you lockjawed into the Leech, that's pretty hairy for me, especially if I didn't get the Sandman down on time because I didn't have Electro or whatever. One other thing I want to illustrate here, I'd love to use Epic Pen, but it's a little wonky without going no full screen. I don't want to Electro Death's Domain because I am going to play Sandman next. So there's not a whole lot of reason to turn off the Electro ability or like worry about getting this power off the board just so that I can drop Sandman on the next turn, right? It doesn't really make sense because now I'm not really worried about locations filling up because even if the Bifrost wasn't here and we couldn't play Death's Domain, I'm still just looking to like Doctor Doom and then Odin, which is going to fill up this and then put 2 here. So like board space really isn't an issue for the remainder of this. Just something I wanted to highlight. But now that Sandman's down and the Lockjaw location is really weak, this is obviously a pretty winning position. I'm not too worried about what's going to happen from here on out, and then I top deck the Doctor Doom, which is feeling pretty good. And this is what I'm talking about where... So throughout this videos, I'm not going to snap too often because I am more so playing for content and to get you guys the footage rather than, you know, playing for cubes. But my opponent decides to snap back, which I thought was a little bit weird considering it should be pretty obvious that this is going to be a Doctor Doom turn on my behalf. And I'm going to be winning all 3 locations potentially, but we'll see how it goes. So they finally get down the Leech, but it's too little too late. They kind of need to Leech the same turn that I Leech Sandman to have any kind of chance. They really need to stop me from Sandman Doctor Dooming. If you can Sandman Doctor Doom, you're in an incredible position, especially if you already have Sunspot in play. But instead, you know, they turn Leech into a Power Stone. It's kind of a low roll. And now I'm winning all 3 locations going into the last turn. Even though I don't have Odin, it doesn't really matter because they blanked out my Ebony Maw. So now I can get 1 mana, 7 power onto 1 location and then have Sunspot gain another 6 power at another location. And the largest thing that they can throw down now is going to be a Magneto at 12 power. So throw down Ebony Maw at Nova Roma for a draw on the Magneto there, at least until it pulls over the Electro, and then I'll have a draw at Death's Domain, but I'll be winning the Bifrost and Nova Roma. If they had played Magneto at the Bifrost, then I still would have tied Nova Roma. I believe I would have lost the Bifrost, but I would have won the tiebreaker at Nova Roma. So really just kind of a slow start from the opponent there means that we get to win out because we got down Sandman and Doctor Doom. This is probably going to be easier if I show you all of the wins and then show you all of the losses rather than kind of like going through it one at a time. So I'll have it timestamped down below. Central Park's not particularly great for either of us. It does slow down their early game a little bit, so I'm inclined to say it's slightly better for me, especially because I'm not Doom Odining as much as I'd like to in this matchup because of the Leech. And it really does just come down to the Leech in so many situations. Gonna fast forward a little bit here for you. They Reality Stone the Dimension, which makes sense. We don't want another Central Park happening. And Sokovia is going to take Odin plus Devil Dino, which I think works out pretty well for me. Odin is not a card that I expect to get value in this matchup because I do expect to get leeched. And then Project Pegasus is really, really good for me. I'm going to Wave and Sandman so that I can go ahead and get down like a Doctor Doom on the next turn or whatever I really want to. I think about Ebony Mawing, but I think it's a little bit better to just get down the Wave and go for the Doctor Doom into a Magneto a little bit later on turn 6. And they have a pretty weak one here, just a Soul Stone and a Magneto. I think Lockjaw in a couple of stones plus something would have been one of the more devastating lines they could have had. Lockjaw Leech, I think, was absolute worst case scenario there. But now that I have down Sandman, here comes Doctor Doom. I'm considering where to put the Doom. I like to contest the Magneto location in case I top deck Odin. And this is another really important situation here, is when you get Doctor Doom down and you get leeched, but you don't have Odin in hand yet. Just one of those situations where you still have a lot of fight back potential. You can see my deck list here. I don't play America Chavez, and part of the reason for that is definitely because I value getting the top deck after getting leeched early in matchups like this. This is the only deck I can think of that's really leeching you early consistently. Blue Marvel is not enough. It's just not putting enough power on the board. I'm still winning a couple of locations. And then because my arrow hasn't been leeched, I can pull whatever to Project Pegasus, and that's going to be the end of the game. Another pretty clean win. And my opponent didn't get down Lockjaw. The board got a little bit flooded, but it's kind of hard to do matchup breakdowns in Marvel Snap because the locations do have such an impact. But then there are cards in the deck, like Shang-Chi, for example, that are in here because of how the locations affect the matchup. But yeah, this is just another pretty clear-cut case of I got down Sandman before they got Leech, and then I got, like, again, establish Sandman, establish Dr. Doom before you get leeched. It's free. It's so free. And that's all we did here. Nothing fancy. Third game, so I always like to check my opponent's deck size at the start of the game just so that I know if I'm playing against Thanos from the get-go or not. And we've got a decent opener. It's got the Electro in it. Lizard is a really timely top deck here. Sunspot might have been better. Ebony Maw would have been a little bit awkward. I don't think I really get into any too complex lines with Ebony Maw throughout this series, but you know, it doesn't really matter what your hand... Like, it almost feels good that I don't have anything crazy here. The Elysium does make things a little bit more awkward because it means that my opponent can now leech me on the following turn. But I don't really have a hand that I'm too worried about getting leeched. And because Washington, D.C. is a location here, it actually almost benefits me to get leeched in some situations just because I will be able to add 3 power to the card that I play at Washington, D.C. So... they She-Hulk, they run out a couple of stones. One of the other loss conditions that I've been running into is getting leeched too early. That's the main one. The second one is if they can put a 10 power unit at each location, usually thanks to Space Stone. Like, if there's a She-Hulk at one location, a Thanos at another, and a Magneto at the third, that is not a game that I am probably winning, even with Shang-Chi. It's only really enough to secure the one location, and it really kind of depends on the cadence of the game. It's really awkward to try and Shang-Chi the Lockjaw location, because they still could just go and get another Lockjaw down. So this is a really good example here of Leech coming down at the same time as the Sandman. I'm only winning one location, I'm losing the location that I'm losing pretty heavily, and I'm probably not confirmed at Elysium because of the Sunspot, but the cards in my hand that got leeched are kind of whatever. Yeah, Shang-Chi onto the She-Hulk would have been a pretty nice pull, but Magneto will do just fine, and I'm going to sort of just reinforce Necrotia so that I no longer have to worry about it, because I know that I can throw a high-power unit over at Washington, D.C. on the last turn, and if they Shang-Chi me at Necrotia under Sandman, I'm still winning that location, is one of the main reasons that is where I put the Magneto. I chose not to contest the Elysium because they have Sunspot. I'm a little bit worried about that. So we're going to throw down Arrow at Washington, D.C. to get a little bit of a buff. Shang-Chi does come out, but again, it doesn't matter. That doesn't actually win them Necrotia, so it was a little bit of a weird play on their end, and then, again, Leech actually did me a favor here and allowed me to win that location rather than draw it. So that was pretty good. I think you're starting to see the patterns here. It really is just like when you get down to it, when you start jamming the matchup over and over again, it really does start to just kind of feel like Leech versus Sandman. And actually, this is a situation that I want to talk about where I have Ebony Maw. It's not a bad turn 1 play, but I'm always terrified of playing Ebony Maw into just undisclosed locations because of exactly something like this, the Baxter Building. If I had put Ebony Maw at the Baxter Building, then I feel like I'm putting myself at a disadvantage because it is one of those locations where if you're winning it, then you're winning all of the other ones. I think the Nexus is sort of the one that I'm always the most concerned of, or whatever it's called, where all of your power at that location gets put to all your other locations. Never want to have to Ebony Maw that if I don't have to. And again, I'm not really trying to kill off my Electro, especially if there's something like Moor Island, where just getting cards there in the early game is going to be extremely beneficial. And then I can throw Vision down there. It's all looking pretty good so far. I don't have Sandman this time around, but they don't have Lockjaw down yet. Now, they did play Quinjet, so I was a little bit scared of just getting Lockjawed in a couple of stones or something like that. But because they didn't play Lockjaw on 3, pretty confident that it's not coming anytime soon. And now I have Dr. Doom Odin. And that is probably going to be enough to win Murder World, and not quite the Baxter Building, but a little bit close. I'm not 100% sure why I decided to Doom Odin at Moor Island rather than the Baxter Building, but I think the plan was just to move Vision out of the way, so I wanted to reinforce a secondary location rather than sort of telegraphing how hard I was going after the Baxter Building. And while I'm not usually in a situation where I'm likely to get Doom Odin down, I generally win the games where I do it, but this was a bit of an odd game. Like, my opponent has played no stones, even though they played Quinjet. I don't even know if this is a Lockjaw variant, to be honest with you, just kind of seeing how the game played out. I have to assume that it is, but... because I don't think you'd Quinjet without Lockjaw. I don't think you care that much about getting all the stones down, unless maybe you're the Khazar version, but then Vision seems weird. Anyway, that one was pretty cut and dry. A little bit of a weird game, but, you know, it happened, so I figured I'd keep it in the video. Alright, this is the 5th win. After this, there will be one more win, and then we get into the losses. So if you're just kind of enjoying watching Thanos lose, then you've still got another couple of games to go through, and we're all chilling. But I've got Sandman in the opener, no ramp to facilitate it. So if my opponent does get down Lockjaw, I'm in a very sketchy situation, especially if Leech can come out of it, or even just a large power card like Thanos or She-Hulk or Magneto. But it's not a Quinjet turn 1. I've been pretty fortunate in my wins of, like, my opponent just not getting down Quinjet. Now, Mojo World's a little bit of a weird location in a matchup like this, because I am always planning on only playing 1 card in a turn. They obviously play a bunch of stones, but they don't seem to be putting out stones at the capacity that you would expect them to. And Dark Dimension into the Ebony Maw, pretty just timely top deck there for me, but again, I don't have any ramps, so they do it for me. I haven't seen Wave in a lot of the Lockjaw variants, but, you know, it worked out for me pretty well. And I'm going to go ahead and Sandman, because that's what I would have done if I had waved. So they leech while I Sandman. Again, this is just pretty cut and dry stuff. This is how it works out. And then because Dr. Doom was not in the hand that got leeched, I feel like I'm in a pretty good situation. I still get to throw down high power cards here. Their turn 5 is usually pretty mediocre. I end up throwing Vision at Mojo World because I don't want to end up just randomly losing that location to its ability. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that they did play a 5-cost card at Dark Dimension. This costs 5. And if it's Devil Dinosaur, then I lose here, right? That just kind of is what it is. This Devil Dinosaur, they have 5 cards in hand, so it will have 13 power, which will beat my 12. But instead, it's Blue Marvel. So I took a little bit of a 50-50 gamble on this one, and it worked out, right? But it is just something to kind of keep in mind that, like, this was not the most secure game in the world. Because Devil Dino here would have beaten me, and I probably just went a little bit too hard on Mojo World, but if I had put Vision at Hellfire Club, I still only would have been at 12, and the She-Hulk still would have beaten me, so if it was, you know, could have been a little bit cleaner here, I think, but I wasn't sure how hard they were going to contest the Mojo World. And this, again, just comes down to, like, really playing around the locations. The one thing that I love so much about the Sandman deck is that it doesn't really get location screwed too often. Dark Dimension obviously can be good for you if you're looking to line up the Doom Odin, but again, this game really just came down to I Sandmaned at the same time that they leeched, and that play is just so tempo negative for them because Sandman is bigger than Leech, that it usually ends up working out in your favor long term, and that's just kind of what we've seen over the last couple of games, what I saw in this game, and likely what we'll see in the next game as well. Alright, I'm going to fast forward you through the early game a little bit here, just because I think I was like AFK for the start of this game. But they throw down a couple of stones, but I've got a solid hand. I've got the Electro into the Sandman as well as the Wave. And I believe that this is a situation where I try something a little bit different, where I go for the Wave, but then because my opponent already has such a stranglehold on the board, and I'm really worried about getting leeched here, I actually end up going for the Dr. Doom rather than the Sandman. And because I didn't nope, I go for the... Okay, yeah, I do go for the Doom. I caught myself... How do I forget my own plays? Anyway, the reason that I do this is because if I play the Sandman and I get leeched this turn, then I can no longer really play the game. I don't have Doom in my deck still to sort of win all of the other locations. And ultimately, I felt like this was the better play into Leech. And then for some reason, my opponent throws Magneto into Lockjaw, which certainly did a lot to help me win the game. I'm not going to pretend that it didn't. And because I didn't get leeched, now I can afford to Sandman. If they leech me here, then it doesn't really matter. I'm already winning quite a few locations. So unless they leech the Shadowland into a big unit there, then I'm not really worried. Instead, it's going to be a Space Stone, which means that at worst they're playing, you know, 5 power or a 5-cost card. So it's going to be Devil Dino, but because I have more cards at Stark Tower, we end up drawing the location. And now I know that I just need to do something simple to win Shadowland. So Dr. Doom Odin is really going to solidify this one, but I did want to highlight that it's not always as simple as just waving into the Sandman, because you do need Dr. Doom to kind of follow it up in a lot of situations, and if Doom is in your deck, fine, but like you can Electro into Sandman safely, but you can't wave into Sandman safely because that also gives them the opportunity to throw down the leech. So As you've seen through most of the wins here, it really is just a lot of like, throw down Sandman before you get leeched, or at the same time that you get leeched, and then follow it up with either, it kind of depends on if you electrode or waved. If you waved, then it's really pivotal that your Doctor Doom does not get leeched. If you electrode, then it's not as important because, you know, you can then throw down just like a Magneto followed by an Odin or a Vision or something. Just get a lot of power on board. If an Ebony Maw got leeched like with a Sunspot like we saw in one of the earlier games, then it is a little bit safer. But ultimately, that seems to be what these matchups are coming down to, is like Leech versus Sandman. And then, you know, we didn't really see any where they get 3 locations with 10 plus power units of like Devil Dino, Magneto, Thanos, or She-Hulk, which isn't something that I've seen happen a whole lot in these games. So it's not a common thing for them, but it is one of the reasons that I play Shang-Chi. And then my opponent just retreats. So that is my 6 wins against Thanos. Now we're going to get into the losses, and a few of them, like I mentioned, misplays on my end, which I take full... I've gone back and watched these VODs, and I have no idea what I was doing in these situations, but this is an educational video, so I'm going to show them to you anyway, put myself on the line, and embarrass myself on some of these for content. So let's take a look at the losses and talk about why I lost those games versus why I won these games. So, kicking things off, not a great hand. Getting my Doom and Odin leeched is not great. Sandman comes to join the party, but I don't have any ramp, even though I have a Lizard, and they get down. Like, Wakandan Embassy is just a really awkward location for my deck, because they're going to play out a lot more of their opening hand than I am. Like, my Doom, Odin, and Lizard got hit by it, so, you know, it's kind of whatever. And because I don't have a ramp card, I decided I'm actually going to throw down Sunspot as opposed to Lizard, which... probably wasn't correct going back and looking at it. I don't know if my Sunspot is going to get to 7 power to sort of match where the Lizard would have been. And then we get Sanctum Sanctorum, which just makes me more concerned for the fact that I did not draw a ramp card, and I still have the opportunity to get my main combo leeched. Because my turn 4 is probably just going to be nothing. I'm just like passing with Sunspot. And a leech coming off of the Lockjaw, or even just organically coming down on 5, can be a big issue. So I'm going to wave, which is a really good top deck for me. Electro wouldn't have been bad either. Like, as long as I can Doom it at the same time that they, you know, kind of play the leech, we're chilling there. Really just need to contest the Sanctum Sanctorum, but because they get a Space Stone, it's really awkward. If they throw the She-Hulk over there, even Doom Odin isn't going to beat that. It's just going to kind of contest it. And realistically, yeah, I Doom Grand Central Station because if Odin is what comes in, then I want it to hit my Doom. I don't want to, like, Doom Wakandan Embassy and then Odin comes in at Grand Central and things are just really awkward from here on out. And I really need the Doom Odin to go off because I need to be able to draw Sanctum Sanctorum with the She-Hulk, but instead they move Sunspot over there. And instead they do go for the leech, so now things are a little bit awkward where... you know, all they need to do is use 5 mana on this turn, and they're in a good spot. Then they Shang-Chi off of the Grand Central. I get Sandman. It really isn't anything. And then, after a lot of deliberation, I'm going to spoil things for you here. I actually am going to end up retreating, and this is one of the big situations where Captain Marvel would have been better than Vision, but it's such a niche scenario, right? And that is kind of what I've noticed about Vision versus Captain Marvel, is most of the situations where you want one or the other, it's very niche. Now, my Sandman is turned off. And my concern is that if my opponent plays a stone at Grand Central and at Wakandan Embassy, then I just lose the game, right? Because that Sunspot is going up to... it really just needs to go up by 1, and they win Sanctum Sanctorum. Even if I Magneto Grand Central, they can still hit a Magneto of their own, but not even so much the... Let me pull up the pen here. Because it's not really, like, I can only contest one of these locations. I can drop a Magneto here, or I can drop a Magneto here, and whichever one of those I do it at, I'm winning. The problem is that I'm almost certainly losing this one, and then if they just go stone, it's not even really a 50-50 for them, because I'm so weak on each of these. Like, if they play a stone here, and they Lockjaw into another stone, and I had played Magneto here, that's, like, really the only situation where I win, is... if they get... oh, but even if they get a 1 power stone here, Lizard still goes down by 3, so I'd be at 16, and then they'd be at 16. So I would... yeah, it's really, really sketchy. The only situation where I win is if they play a stone, get another stone, so we draw Grand Central. I always assume that I'm losing Sanctum Sanctorum, so we'll still call that an L. And then I need my Magneto to be significantly bigger than whatever they play here, right? I'm kind of taking Thanos out of the equation. I think worst case for me would be like Stone Devil Dino, specifically Time Stone, because Time Stone still gives the 1 over to here. So Time Stone Devil Dino, I'm probably not winning the tiebreaker. Maybe I am. But yeah, that's like the only specific scenario where I win. So I do end up retreating. Although I probably shouldn't have retreated, just because, again, I'm playing for content, not for cubes, so I really should be playing the games out. But that situation is like, it's so narrow where I actually win here that I just decided to save myself a little bit of cubes. Again, check the deck, make sure I'm playing against Thanos. Just something that I like to get in the habit of. You know, if there's 14 cards in your opponent's deck, there's only one thing that it could possibly be. But we've got a pretty good opener, right? Wave into Doom is kind of ideal. It's not going to give them a lot of room to, like, leech us, and Ebony Mawing Kunlun with Sunspot feels fine to me. It's always a little awkward when I don't have Sandman for Raft games. That's always a big concern of mine and something that I'm really cognizant of, because I'm pretty much never going to win the Raft. Although, I do have a couple of misplays this game, and I'll point them out as they come. Soulstone and Space Stone, which is weird to me that they used the Space Stone so early, but, you know, who am I to judge? Maybe they just really needed to get on board and try to fill up the Raft as quickly as possible. Now, I wave Warrior Falls instead of the Raft, and I think what I was looking for was just kind of a buffer card at Warrior Falls, which doesn't really make sense. Really should have just waved the Raft here. Because there's no point in throwing away my cards like that. But I'm feeling pretty confident because I know I have Wave into Doom. We'll kind of see where it goes, but, you know, the fact that they have the 0 mana card and I don't have Sandman yet makes it a little bit more awkward. Usually the Raft isn't too much of an issue because you are just looking to Sandman. And then the fact that it Reality Stones into Nidavellir is awful for me because now, instead of just playing Dr. Doom here and winning the Raft because they only have 4 power here, suddenly I have to commit a lot more to this location than I really wanted to, and I'm already cut off of Kunlun. So things get really dicey for me really fast here. It was a really good high roll on their part to hit the Nidavellir, but it wasn't game-defining, I don't think. That I have not really gone and looked at, and then, you know, they leech me, so now I don't have Odin Doom. They end up losing their leech, which would have happened even if I hadn't played Wave at Warrior Falls. The Doombot still would have done it. And now, like, all I can really do is continue to pump cards into Nidavellir. I would have had to pump one in here anyway, because Doom will not hold it down if they play Blue Marvel. So I had to commit at least one more card here. The issue is, like, you know, what can I do on turn 6? And it is continuously awkward because I'm winning too many locations. Even if I draw Shang-Chi, which I do, and I expect them to play something at Warrior Falls that I could Shang-Chi, you know, I still need to commit one card into Nidavellir, and I'm kind of mathing it out to make sure that Lizard is enough to win Nidavellir through Blue Marvel, and it is. And I'm kind of debating if I want to Shang-Chi Warrior Falls because I'm flipping first, or if I just want to pump all this power into the Sunspot. You can't see... So, this is not live, right? I'm not playing the game currently. This is a VOD, but I can see my face cam that I'm currently overwriting from the game, and it's really awkward. My opponent ends up snapping, and I'm like, screw it. I gotta stay in for content, kind of see how this plays out. But at the moment, if they... It really depends on what 6 cost they got, because there are some unplayable 6 costs, and they need to win Warrior Falls, and they need to do a little bit more than play Blue Marvel at Kunlun to win that location. And they end up getting Null and Quinjet. And then Null is going to be bigger than the Quinjet, so I end up, like, drawing all around and then very narrowly losing the tiebreaker here. I feel like this game could have been a win if they didn't hit Nidavellir. Especially because they played another card here in order to buff up the Null. So in case you missed it, what happened was they had a 7-power Null, then they played a 3-power Quinjet, and then because Quinjet died to Warrior Falls, it went into a 10-power Null. But if I didn't have to commit so many cards to Nidavellir, I feel like there was other avenues I could have taken to win this location a little bit harder even, and just kind of win the tiebreaker here. So kind of unfortunate here, the timing on the location and stuff, but ultimately it is still a loss, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day. But this one felt close, and that's kind of what I want to illustrate here, is that I don't think this is like a super cut and dry, yeah, you get bodied by Thanos Lockjaw. It does feel a little bit more nuanced than that. But they didn't have Lockjaw this game, so maybe it's not more nuanced than that, and maybe I just high rolled by them not having that sort of namesake card at their disposal. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. This one's kind of rough. Check the deck. It's Thanos. We're chilling. Hand's looking pretty good. We've got Electro into Sandman into Doctor Doom, so as long as they're not lockjawing into the Leech or timestoning into the Leech, then I should be able to establish the Sandman and get the Doctor Doom down, which is a very winning combination of cards. We should be chilling. We'll throw down the Lizard. Hand's looking really good. They're not doing anything crazy. Quinjet hasn't come down yet, so a Lockjaw, like, they're not going to have a really explosive Lockjaw turn here. The Raft is not too threatening because I am going to Sandman. And then things go wrong for me very quickly, and I get tilted, which really doesn't happen often. I'm actually a little surprised. Like, I just didn't evaluate what was happening fast enough. So I get Mr. Negative, and they get She-Hulk. And then they snap. And I'm looking at it, and I end up retreating, which is really, really poor on my part for a couple of reasons. But the main one is that my strategy for the rest of the game, right? Because we're only on turn 4, so like I'm going to get 5 mana and then 6 mana and then 7 mana. My ideal is Sandman, Doctor Doom, and Odin. And I already have Doctor Doom and Odin in my hand. So I really shouldn't be retreating here because everything is still going according to plan. Now, if I get leeched next turn, it still doesn't really matter because I will still get down the Doctor Doom. I'm already doing pretty well at the Raft. And really, the main concern is, like, if they throw down 2 cards here, the turn that I play Sandman, they get their 0 cost, and then, you know, it's something huge. Maybe I'm not winning Crimson Cosmo, right? That's something I could see. Maybe I win the Raft, and then because I have a Mr. Negative here, things are looking kind of rough. But I do still have Shang-Chi somewhere in the deck, and because I'd be able to get down Doom, I think that, like, you know, Doom here, get a Doombot here, Shang-Chi it, probably enough to shore up this location, and that takes away the Odin play, but I'm expecting to get leeched. So I feel like this was a winnable game, and I just got really tilted seeing my opponent get a She-Hulk while I get a Mr. Negative. And, you know, that means, like, I've got 7/5 Vision in my deck. I've got 6/6 Magneto. I don't think they let Magneto go to 12/6. I hope not. They might. But I've got a lot of unplayable cards in my deck, but it doesn't really matter because everything that I need I already have in hand. So another loss, a quick concession on my part, and I probably should have played this one out a little bit further, but I think when my opponent snapped reasonably because I got Mr. Negative and they got She-Hulk, on ladder, yeah, I think you scoop in this situation. If you're really playing for preservation of cubes and you're trying to play as efficiently as possible, you probably just retreat in a situation like this, but probably could have played it out and at least seen how it went because I did have the tools available that I needed. On to game number 4, things are looking okay. We've got Electro and Doctor Doom. We've got Shang-Chi in case they get a really early Lockjaw into a big Thanos location. Morag is one of the locations that is going to be the absolute worst for me because they can play things there in the early game and I can't really reinforce it until I start getting Doctor Doom down. And then Olympia, like, fills my hand, but it doesn't really matter because, you know, I would have drawn those cards sooner or later anyway. It is just unfortunate that my opponent actually can do something with the handful that they were given. And then Negative Zone, not too bad for me, to be honest. I'll take Negative Zone just because I have so many high power cards and they've got some awkward things to throw down there. Lockjaw comes down at the Negative Zone. Electro's coming, so now the Negative Zone still feels a little worth fighting over. There are still enough stones in their deck that they can low roll the Lockjaw and I'll be able to get in there. So I Sandman, we're chilling. But if I get leeched in this position, it is game over. Again, you really need the Sandman to come down without them getting on board too much too early. And it really depends on what they can do with this situation. Like, if they're just throwing down a bunch of stones at the Lockjaw location and really, like, shoring up the Negative Zone while leeching me, that's an issue. Like, if they throw down 3 stones and it rolls into, like, Leech, She-Hulk, Thanos, for example, right? That's pretty unwinnable position. Space Stone's also going to be a little bit awkward just because they can sort of reinforce Morag, but if they do roll into the Leech, which is, I mean, half my deck got leeched. All of my 6 drops, I think all of my 5 drops other than Sandman. So now my cards in deck are like Ebony Maw, Lizard, Sunspot. This is just an absolutely back-breaking leech, even though they are still not winning the Negative Zone. Just because they got so many low-power units there. But my Shang-Chi being offline means that this is going to be quite the task. And I actually throw down Odin at the negative zone because I don't want my Magneto to be Shang-Chi-able just yet. I want that to be a surprise last turn play. And all I can really do is kind of fight through what I can. And now my Magneto at Olympia is looking pretty good. They obviously have a lot of cards that they can throw at negative zone to still win the game. Or not really a lot, right? They kind of need... They would need to, like, Lockjaw into Devil Dinosaur, or... She-Hulk wouldn't do it. She-Hulk, I think, they would still be losing by 1. But instead, they just arrow me. And it's that simple sometimes. You just get arrowed at a location. I've done this to people. It'll happen again. But ultimately, that game didn't feel as bad as I thought it would for getting half of my deck hit with the leech, but again, it does really just kind of illustrate how much the matchup does come down to, did you get leeched? If you are playing against a Lockjaw Thanos and they are not playing leech, I feel like you are, I would even go so far as to say favored in a matchup like this, but that card is just so backbreaking right now. Another game, another okay opener. You know, we've got the wave. We don't have Sandman yet. We don't have Dr. Doom yet. But honestly, I'm starting to get in a situation where I prefer not having Dr. Doom in my opening hand because we are really just looking to not get that card hit with the leech. Tinker's Workshop doesn't really matter for either of us on turn 1, it turns out. And honestly, I'm a little surprised to see the Power Stone come down. I feel like that's the one that they care about the least. So probably want to Lockjaw that one away. But maybe it draws a card. I can't keep track of which. I know one of them doesn't draw a card. I'm pretty sure Power Stone's the only one that doesn't draw a card. So... you know, it is what it is. But I find Electro. I've got Sandman. Things are looking pretty good. They get the Lockjaw down. So yeah, Sewer System's going to be a little bit awkward to sort of contest, but I want to put the Sandman there anyway, in case they actually do struggle with contesting it, because Sandman at the negative zone, it's not that impactful. That's where, like, the heavy hitters are supposed to go. So we'll see what the Lockjaw pulls. If it's Leech, I'm still in a fine position because I still have Dr. Doom in deck and I successfully landed my Sandman, so we're actually feeling like we're doing pretty okay so far. My follow-up to the Sandman is a little bit awkward. You know, Vision's okay, Magneto would have been cool, but I kind of like the Lockjaw where it is, and I don't feel the need to Magneto the Sewer System. I'd rather save Magneto as a heavy hitter in case I don't draw the Dr. Doom, so we'll just get Vision online, so that I can go ahead and sort of secure a location on turn 6 and figure out where I need to be playing. So they Time Stone away the Soul Stone. They play a Devil Dinosaur. That's all well and good. And now my plan is to... what is my plan? Yeah, I'm just going to Shang-Chi the Devil Dinosaur because I'm already winning a couple of locations. I'm going to fast forward for you here. So I do go for the Shang-Chi. The problem is that I move Vision to the Sewer System for some reason. Rather than, like, taking the free win on the negative zone by leaving the Vision there, I decide to go and contest a location that I really have no business contesting, when I could have just stayed in my lane and had a much better time, because I'd be 4 power here. You know, I'm winning this one. I really don't understand why I moved the Vision here. I don't really have an explanation for you. So this really should have been a win, and this is just me punting, and that happens. It happens, and just kind of want to illustrate that even though I went 50-50, you know, 6-6 against the Thanos Lockjaw, I think that if you can clean up your play a little bit better than I did on this day, then you will find a level of success, and I think that this deck is, like, a lot of fun and a little underrated right now. So really want to spread the gospel of it by showing you that punting happens, and if you don't do it, then you actually do have better matchups here. So this was just a really poorly played game by me, but it does happen. And we've got another game where, you know, no Sandman in the opener. Would like to see that because we are against Thanos Lockjaw, but Doom in the opener also not great. Kind of worried about that Leech coming down. And that's really the big pressure point, is, like, you know, Leech, Sandman. I've said it 100 times this video because I really want to drive home the importance of it. I think it is a big defining moment of the matchup. And you kind of just need to know, like, when to Doom, when to Sandman, if you went for the wave. Because initially my thoughts was, like, you know, you wave on 3, and then if they didn't play Quinjet, then they throw down Lockjaw. Now they can only throw 1 card into the Lockjaw before you get down Sandman, and that's probably looking pretty good. But depending on how many cards they played out in the early game, Leech can be enough, because if your Doom gets leeched when you play Sandman, it's pretty impossible for you to go ahead and, like, contest all of those other locations, and things just get really out of hand and awkward really quickly. because this feels like it should have been a winning game. Like, I got an Altar of Death onto my Electro, so now I've got 7 mana on turn 4 to throw down a Doctor Doom. I don't have Odin in hand yet, but because of Limbo, I'm very likely to find Odin by the end of the game and, you know, secure the Altar of Death, unless they Reality Stone it and start contesting it, but they'd have to do that sometime soon. And I do think it was more important to get down Doom than Sandman here, because I think my opponent was on 5 mana for the turn. Yeah, so I do get leeched here. And I'd rather my Sandman get leeched than my Doom get leeched when my opponent already has so many more cards on board, especially because if I threw down Sandman here, I'm not winning Altar of Death, right? They've got the Mind Stone there. There's nothing that I'd be able to do to get myself on that location if my Doom does get hit with the leech. So now, things are a little awkward, but, you know, Odin is still in the deck, unleeched, and they're kind of running out of space at Limbo. And they don't have a whole lot going on there. So, like, I you know, Magneto isn't pulling anything. Do I just want to get down something big? Do I want to put this Magneto in the way of a Shang-Chi? These are kind of the thoughts that are going through my head right now. And I don't have a super clean and obvious line here, because I do want to be sort of cognizant of the presence of Shang-Chi, especially because I don't have down Sandman, so they can run out, like, multiple stones plus Shang-Chi, and I'm in a bit of an issue. Instead, they go for Devil Dinosaur and a Vibranium. So they're really packing onto the Altar of Death, but I'm still winning Limbo. I'm still winning Vibranium Mines. Unfortunately, I draw a Vibranium instead of Odin. Odin here would have felt really, really good, but I've still got turn 7 coming to try and draw the Odin. Again, I'm not under Electro. We're not under Sunspot, so I'm just going to kind of play out my cards. I want to Vibranium Altar of Death to set up for a potential Odin top deck. Throw down my arrow, whatever. Blue Marvel comes in. And then they Reality Stone Limbo. And all of a sudden the game is over, and they draw a card off the Reality Stone, so Devil Dinosaur comes in, and then they've got more mana, so like Sunspot comes in and wins. This one felt close and kind of funky, and that's kind of what I like going over these VODs for, is like my losses were kind of funky. A couple of my wins were funky, but I feel like more of my losses were funky or due to misplays. Of course, I don't know my opponent's hand, so it's a lot harder to tell when they misplay versus when I misplay. But the point I really want to get at here is that I feel like this deck is viable, I feel like it's a little underrated, and I feel like you do have a lot of game into Thanos Lockjaw. So if tournaments are something that you're looking for, I still think that if you're expecting a big field of Thanos Lockjaw, that this is not an unreasonable choice to bring, and it is definitely more of a budget option because there are no pool 4 or pool 5 cards anywhere in here. This is one of the sort of quote-unquote cheaper decks of the format, and, you know, Vision's not mandatory. That could be Captain Marvel. I think Sandman, Shang-Chi, Sunspot are all, and Lizard are like a lot of pool 2 cards. If I remember correctly, I'm so bad at remembering what's pool 2, pool 3, but I think like half this deck is pool 2. So really what I want to highlight here is a pretty skill expressive deck. You know, it really just need to nail down your Sandman turns, your Doom turns, your lines into the leech, the sort of hands that you have that can play through that, and then, you know, sort of min-maxing your snapping. Because again, I didn't even really get into the mentality of snapping in situations like this because I didn't want my opponents retreating before the game played out so that I had a full game to show you for content. But I hope you guys like this. I'll have a lot more of these coming because this is the kind of content that I enjoy doing. And if you stuck around to the end, thank you so much, because I know this got kind of long. I am Boulevard, and I have some Marvel Snapcasts coming up later this month that you should tune into. So follow me on Twitter at casterboulevard to know when and where I'm going live, because it is almost never on my own channel because I do shoutcasting. So thank you so much for watching. You have been great, and good luck in your climb.